You got to think about that too, because, in the future, should the frequency and severity of these weather events continue, what will that house look like if it's perched on a cliff top?
And you have to think not only sure it's insured from when you bought it, but what's the value to on sale.
Welcome to Slice, Property Made Possible. We're a platform on a mission to reduce barriers to home ownership. This podcast is a safe space for our community to learn together and build the confidence required to start on their property journey. When you're ready to start, head along to slicetobuy.com and sign up for your free dashboard.
Kia ora e hoa, we're back with Slice the podcast, and I'm super excited for today's episode. With the ever-evolving world we're living in, we're focusing on insurance, and we're joined today by Blair Turnbull, CEO of Tower. Hello, Blair.
Hello.
Thanks for coming. Before we jump into all things insurance, we might take a bit of a trip down memory lane. So what can you remember, Blair, about your first home purchase?
Oh gosh, well, I'm a big believer and fan of the school of mistakes and not. So my first home was actually an old scarfy flat from Dunedin, which was just hanging in there and not much more. But I realised pretty quickly that it was much more fun owning the home than paying for rent.
So were you at uni when you sort of made that jump?
Yeah, I was at Otago Uni, and just in the last few years managed to scrape some credit together and have a wee flat in North East Valley, which was great.
That's pretty much what we're advocating for. We also support with co-ownership our platform. So if you are flatting, rather than spending, $10,000 a year across 10 years, purchase with friends and then flat and live in it.
Yeah, touche.
So when you think of insurance and property insurance in particular, do you want to just give an overview of exactly what it is and why it's important for us?
Sure. I think first and foremost, you've spent and put a lot of effort into this beautiful home, whether you're investing in a home or buying it for your family. And the last thing you want to happen is some unexpected event to occur and then you lose it all. And that can impact you for a very, very long time. So, the art of insurance is all about protecting the things that are dear to you, that you love, your family, and so on. And insurance, essentially, this is probably the Wikipedia version of it. Insurance is a contract for compensation for a specified asset, i.e. a home or a car, in the event of a specified loss. So it could be fire or flood, in exchange for paying some monies, which is premium. So the long and short of it is, it's there to protect key assets in your life.
Very important stuff. And when it comes to property insurance, we're seeing a lot of sort of changes in the environment and things like the goings on in Hawke's Bay. How does that impact insurance in the industry? What are you seeing with market trends and how that's impacting policyholders?
Oh, sure. Look, and first and foremost, we need to work with Mother Nature rather than against her. I think this is the big learning. And I think with the events this year, which have been unprecedented, these are the biggest weather events we've seen in New Zealand for over 200 years in terms of the Auckland anniversary event and also Cyclone Gabrielle. And I'm pleased that as a country, as communities, we realize that we need to do things differently and we need to see where we plan and where we build and how we protect and mitigate and adapt to these weather events. And I think we really have crossed the Rubicon, and I don't think there's any turning back. Now is a question of how do we adapt to it? How do we mitigate? How do we not build in flood-prone areas? And Mother Nature's way of helping floods is wetlands. And unfortunately for New Zealand, we have reclaimed 90% of our wetlands. So when big rainstorms and cyclones do happen, it's challenging for that water to run off quickly. And so we do need to think about how do we plan better? Don't build in flood-prone areas. If you're looking to buy a home, how do you get the necessary information that you need to really understand your home and then make sure it's protected?
Yeah, and potentially in terms of those flood-prone areas and wetlands, are we able to kind of create sort of artificial wetlands so that the water floods a particular area instead of kind of the housed areas? What sort of progress are you seeing in that space? Because obviously that's not necessarily up to you as the insurer. It's, government, it's council. There's a lot of moving parts to kind of make some of those changes.
Yeah, it's been really pleasing this year that Tower has been part of a task force working with the government working with councils and working with the insurance industry in particular to really understand, to make sure that we do learn from these events this year, and then to start building back better, to looking how we mitigate, manage water flows, etc., as well as adapt. And adapt to me is the key one. Let's stop building in flood-prone areas. Let's not build. I know we love a view. We all love views in New Zealand, but let's maybe stop building right up close to the cliff faces and start building in areas which are more suitable for the longer term, where we expect to see some of these high frequency of weather events.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into a bit more detail around what first-home buyers should be considering, but basically what you've said there is that there are certain areas that perhaps you should be considering to purchase in, as opposed to right on the cliff or right by the water.
A key part of that is, I've been lucky and privileged to work in insurance all around the world and in 4 different continents as it's turned out. And, when I lived in Singapore, I saw the value and the benefit of a plan for 30 to 50 years in advance, where they do plan for these things. We have the luxury of space. You don't have that space in Singapore, and they can make it work. They have a lot of rain. Tropical rain is another whole new level. We need to learn from economies like that, to have a plan that does extend out beyond political, policies, and so that we are planning. We do have the luxury of space. We need to invest in infrastructure to join up those communities. We can do that. That's all within our remit as New Zealand, Aotearoa. So I think with a bit of planning, with some foresight, with some smart people working collaboratively, we can absolutely adapt and mitigate to these events.
In terms of that, moving into parliamentary term or changing governments, is that something that you're exploring in your conversations with government? Actually, how can we kind of have this robust budget plan goals to improve that?
Yeah, and that's the thing, the point I made earlier about I think we have crossed the Rubicon. We've realized that we can't just sort of say that, this climate change thing is not a if, it's here, it's present, and it's possibly going to accelerate. Likely it will accelerate. So I do think there's a joint understanding that we need to do things differently. I have been very pleased with the task force that's been a combination of insurers, councils, government working together on both sides of the house, working together to say, right, what can we do now to recover from the events earlier this year, but also most importantly, what sort of framework can we put in place for the future generations, so that people, can invest in homes with confidence that they're not going to be flooded or impacted by these weather events.
And this is a bit of a tricky one, but what does it mean for sort of policyholders, that might have some of those high risk properties now? How are you kind of looking at policies and how to ensure them?
I think the key one here is, and we're very passionate about this at Tower, is helping mums, dads, investors understand the perils or events. So when we look at in an individual home, we look at the individual home and we price for the individual home. So if you came to Tower and got a quote, we would help you understand the perils that could be potentially at risk with your home, individual home. And we do this right around the country for all homes in New Zealand. And you'll get an assessment of earthquake risk, an assessment of flood. And in the future, or very shortly actually, in the coming months, you'll also see an assessment around the perils for coastal inundation or sea surge or storm surge, as well as slips. And so you're starting to form a picture at an individual home level of the risks that may be applicable to an individual home. And that starts with helping customers understand their home. Then they can understand the cover they need to protect the home that they've invested with and saved for so diligently.
And is there opportunity in some of those conversations that you're having with government, I'm just sort of spitballing here, that if you identify some of these high risk incidents, say that it is a house that's kind of quite close to the cliff, do we think that there's opportunity, or is the government exploring, from what you're aware, the ability to fund or support preventative measures, like potentially lifting and shifting house further away, for example?
So, you've seen this year with Cyclone Gabrielle in particular on the East Coast, and also here in Auckland with the anniversary event, you've seen the first form of this managed retreat, as we call it, which is moving back from the clear events of the floods. And so in the case of Auckland, last week, Mayor Brown detailed his plan to move around 700 homes potentially that have been impacted significantly from the events. And in those cases, there will be a proposal to those homeowners to consider whether a buyout is the right option for them. And so those are places like Muriwai that have been impacted significantly. Taking a step back, as a country, we can't necessarily afford to move everybody out of the way of flood-prone areas. It could potentially be tens of thousands of homes in the future that are impacted. So we do need to think about mitigation as well as adapting to weather events. And I think there's some things that we can all do as homeowners to actually help support that and have, get confidence in your own protection around the home, whether it's through maintenance. You could consider some sort of drainage around the home. You could elevate some of your home if you're thinking about a renovation, put some elevation on it. You can think about retaining walls to the water that comes across the land. So there are things that you can do. Certainly we've seen this year, pumps and sumps become very, very popular. As people realize, there's been surface flooding into garages. Pumps and sumps are a good way of helping to mitigate that. So there are things that the government can do, and I'm really pleased that they are working on those longer term plans. Things that the councils are doing. We're sharing an enormous amount of data as an insurance industry and as Tower individually with councils to help them better understand flood-prone areas like we have done in the past with earthquake. And as well as that, individual homeowners do have options. You can help to mitigate and adapt to weather events.
That's really positive, I think, to hear that there is that mitigation and support for people that perhaps have bought in high risk areas. So it's not about just looking forward, it's also kind of retrospective in approach. For first home buyers, though, that are in the market now, what's your view on this? I mean, the advice for existing homeowners is obviously potentially going to look a little bit different for a first home buyer. For example, we had a customer who had a limb and there was coastal inundation, coastal erosion risk on that limb. Looking through that and thinking, what does that mean in the future and your ability to potentially get insurance at a later date, or when you go to sell, being able to get insurance at that next stage. What's your thoughts for first home buyers? What should they be thinking about when investing in their first home?
First thing, know your home. Really know your home. I know it's not easy necessarily reading through a LIM report and seeing all those geo reports if you haven't gone to university and studied engineering. So, it is tough. But first of all, you need to know your home. So in the case of Tower, for example, you can go and get a quote, and we will, in a very simple way, detail for you the perils around your home from an earthquake point of view, flooding, and in the future, coastal inundation and slips. And so you'll get a very simplified version of low, medium, high, or very high, how that particular house rates according to those perils. So I think you can use examples like that. I think EQC, have a look and see if there's been a claim previously submitted against that house. And so that gives you a sense of slips and earthquakes, not flood, but slips and earthquakes. And so those things you can go on and access quite easily, look around, look at some history. I think we learned, unfortunately, the hard way. If we go back and look at the Auckland anniversary event, some of those properties, like in Shore Road and Muriwai, were hit in 1971 when there was another big storm. And we haven't learnt those lessons, and we've rebuilt in those areas. So research the home, know your home. And that's where Tower, we believe we have a positive role to play. We do take information out of the LIM report. In fact, we take over 5,000 pieces of data about an individual home for every home in the country. And then what's most importantly, and insurance companies haven't always been this way, we've been notoriously bad for holding on to data. We do share it back and we say, here are your perils for this home. And then we also go to the effort of saying, well, this is what your premium will look like and how it's broken down and allocated according to earthquake or flood, for example. And I think you've got to think about that too, because, in the future, should the frequency and severity of these weather events continue, what will that house look like if it's perched on a cliff top?
And you have to think not only, yeah, sure, it's insured from when you bought it, but what's the value of that into on sale? To your point around the insurance quote, it's great to know that you guys provide a bit of detail in terms of what the levels of risk perhaps are. That's us. We've got a due diligence list, and one of those steps is get a quote for insurance. And not everyone necessarily knows this, right? So we've been really taking our time to make sure we've got every step covered there. And that is one of the key things when it comes to considering risk, is actually not just relying on what the vendor said, hey, yes, we're insured, and here's a letter confirming our insurance, but it's actually, what does it look like in today's market? What are the risks there now? And we do have partners that support with moving through that due diligence process for those that don't want to look at them and might need a little bit of extra support. But I think that insurance piece is becoming more and more important. A lot of our lawyers are starting to put a condition on a sale and purchase when making an offer to say subject to insurance. So that's sort of how important it's becoming and known in the industry to be such a crucial step when considering a property. And particularly when you've got the opportunity, you've got green pastures, you can go out and find a decent property and do your research, know your home, as you say, and pick. So you're not in the same position where someone, 10 years ago, not knowing the risks, maybe purchased.
Totally right. And look, prior to getting the world's best job in insurance, I worked with ASB as an executive, and I also understand from the banking point of view, where I was also focused on insurance, as it turns out. But the point of the story being, if you're looking to lend, there will be that condition and attachment on insurance. And unfortunately, for us as Kiwis in Aotearoa, we live in the second riskiest country in the world for natural perils. Bangladesh, unfortunately, has the honour of being the riskiest place. It's very, very flood prone. It's in low-lying areas by the Indian Ocean, and it is very flood prone. New Zealand is second because of the earthquakes and also the weather and storm events. And what's happened more recently is that the perception of risk for New Zealand has increased with these large events. And that means, unfortunately for customers, insurance will likely be more expensive. And so it will become an important part of your decision when you're looking at the house. You've also got to think of the ongoing running costs. To protect it is important. And it will be a material amount for insurance. It's important to shop around. Now, there's some things you can do to make it more affordable. I'm sure we'll get into those, Amy, but it is important that you think about not just, you're so excited. I know I was so excited when I bought my first home. I never thought past the next day. But then there are things, there's rates, there's obviously interest and repayments, but there's also insurance. And the cost of it, unfortunately, has been going up because the risks are perceived to be higher.
Yeah, and so it's not to say that you're not necessarily going to be able to get insurance. It's more to say that you're going to be paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cost of it, but also in our case, we price at an individual home level. So we do look through to those risks, and we will price in. We won't necessarily say no, but we will price in the cost of your home in terms of allocation to flood or earthquake. So if you are on a flood-prone area, high or very high, your premium in the case of tower will reflect that. We call that risk-based pricing.
So premiums, and then there's sort of the on-sale as well once you get to that point. Do you perceive, looking forward, that there may be houses that you're unable to insure because of some of those risks?
There's a very real risk of uninsurable properties in New Zealand if we don't mitigate and adapt, and the frequency and severity of these weather events continue. And only time will tell, but I would certainly, on that basis, encourage, again, anyone listening to, first and foremost, know your home. Do the research. I know it's incredibly exciting.
To potentially have an amazing view or to potentially be right by the water, but is that actually a smart move? It's challenging working with some of our first home buyers. You get with houses that might have dodgy cladding or weather tightness issues, but the house is quite incredible and impactful. So it really is about taking a measured approach and going, hang on though, what is the risks involved with this property, even though it might be a really nice big property, but is it right by the ocean and subject to coastal inundation or erosion? And so just taking into consideration some of those things. And I think for these first home buyers, they have the benefit or the opportunity to make that decision as opposed to being an existing homeowner.
And in the past, it's been hard yards to work out some of those things. We all know about leaky homes and the importance of doing a building inspection. So we've learned from the School of Knox to do that. And we also know that, you check out things like how far to the schools, because that's important to you and future potential buyers of the home. But I think now you've got to make sure on that checklist, also think, what are the risks potentially to this home in terms of earthquake, in terms of flood, in terms of slips, coastal inundation? The good piece here is you can get that information with a little bit of searching. Go and check out Tower or other insurers to understand the risk profile. Check out EQC to see if it's ever had a claim against it in the case of earthquake or slip. So you can find out that information pretty quickly, actually.
And all of those steps are in our dashboard at Slice.
I will check that out for sure.
Yeah, when you're next purchasing.
That's right. I'm probably past my first home, but
Yeah.
still.
But you forget the steps and each time you do it. So you've got to go through and just make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. I've done it the opposite way around. In terms of whether you're existing or you are a new homeowner, as that premium becomes more expensive, it's how can you manage that?
Make sure you have the right cover and you can afford that cover. First of all is know your sum insured. Think about your excess. So don't use your insurance policy as a maintenance policy, especially as a first homeowner. It'll be challenging. Affordability could be a challenge for you. So you want to make sure you've got the right cover, but you're not paying too much. So sum insured, know your sum insured, and you can pop online to something like My Tower, or a lot of insurers have this, where you can go into a calculator and you can work out your right sum insured, which would be the cost of having to rebuild today. And so get the sum insured right. Make sure that actually, if you're buying a property, if there's been a renovation done on it or a swimming pool, make sure that they are included in your quote, because if you have to do a swimming pool again, they are quite expensive. And things like retaining walls as well. So get those in the quote, and then you get an accurate sum insured, because what you don't want is a surprise. So for example, 2 years ago, almost to the day, 3 years ago, almost to the day, OHAL came along. OHAL fires, for those that remember it. And there were like 50 homes that were burnt to the ground. And we learned from that a lot of people's sum insured were too low and they were underinsured. And so then they got a surprise. And we got a surprise as the insurer, which we've changed the way that we do that now to make sure that we're really accurate on the sum insured, because you don't want a surprise at claim time. Excess. Don't use your insurance policy, in my view, certainly as a first home buyer, as a maintenance policy. So don't think of it as, this is the way to, to fix something, a broken window or something. If your excess, if you push a higher excess, you'll be able to have a reduced premium. So make sure you get that trade-off right, making sure you have comprehensive cover in the event of a big event and having to replace your home or significant damage, like, for example, in a flood. So make sure you get the sum insured right, but then have your excess higher so that you can reduce your premium and you can afford the insurance and sleep well at night. I think those are really two things that are important.
In terms of regional differences as well, because you've spoken about EQC potentially down in Christchurch, that's the earthquake concerns that appear on the mums down there. And there's often reports that come up on those properties that say, hey, this may have been fixed, this is left unfixed, despite claiming that insurance. There's going to be some different views or different things that you look at based on your regions. How are you seeing that's impacting those premiums and those policies that you're able to offer?
Yeah, again, at the heart of what we do at Tower is risk-based pricing. So we do price for an individual home and we price for the risks that apply to that home. So we don't smooth it over the country. That's a traditional insurer. We do price for an individual home and we make sure it's very clear the risks associated with that home. And then we break down the premium so that actually customers understand it. And again, this is all about helping customers understand it. New Zealand, we're really obsessed with weather. We're obsessed with our homes. Those are two things that are guaranteed. But we also do sort of understand the importance of insurance. We have the highest level of insurance of any developed country in the world, actually. So we know that earthquakes happen and storms come through. And so I would say, around the country, understand your home. The prices will vary, and do shop around. Just like you research and you do all the effort to find the right perfect first home, do the same with the insurance.
And when it comes to looking at your first home and trying to move through that checklist and look at the land information memorandum, sale and purchase, get a quote for insurance, because you don't have to commit to that quote. It's just about getting a quote for each property that you're looking at, and then you'll get an understanding of, okay, the premiums do seem to be going up for this type of property that has a few of these higher risk issues. So for first home buyers, the opportunity is to know the home before they buy it. And with the knowledge and the information we have now around climate related events, actually getting a quote and kind of making a decision from there.
Yeah, look, what I remember back to my first home, as we mentioned earlier, Amy, and wandering around Dunnos and sorting that out. It felt like when you found the home, really nice, was on the side of a hill. In hindsight, maybe, I hope it's still there, but it was a good little home, flatter. I remember going to the insurance piece and almost it felt like an examination. I remember having to go along to the branch, so like 75 questions. And I kid you not, we ask about 9 questions for a new customer and about 5 for an existing customer. And why? Because we've invested heavily in technology and data to try and make that process easy so that you can come in and explore insurance without the hassle. And then you can also understand it. And you can do it online, and it's a matter of minutes. So it doesn't have to be a burden to find out about that home and also understand what your insurance will look like.
Just great to know when you are going through the process and you've got to do about 12 other things at the same time. So it is important to work through that checklist and jump on and get a quote from Tower or whomever to just at
Money
least,
Hub,
yeah,
CanStar, check out, and do shop around. It can be quite a material difference.
yeah, but it's worth making sure that you've got that clarity before you're purchasing a property rather than purchasing it and trying to retrospectively insure it and not knowing that insurance is going to be super expensive or not considering what resale might be. Because I think that's one thing that's really pressing in my mind is when customers are looking at a property and it does have a few of those high risk issues, it is not really about whether or not that's likely to happen in the next 5 years. It's more if you do hold the house for 10 years and then you go to sell it, it becomes what's that next insurer gonna be looking at?
I think that's a good point you raise, Amy. The perils or the risks associated with your home today do change. They do change. We got a lot of surprises in the Auckland anniversary event when we had an enormous amount of rain. Homes that have never been flooded. And let's hope it was unprecedented and doesn't happen for another 200 years, but we won't know until we know. So don't set and forget your insurance. When the renewal comes up, look at it. Make sure, has it got my renovation? Has it got the lovely new pool? Has it put my new retaining walls in? And can I possibly, move my excess to help someone with affordability? Is the sum insured right? Because over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen this robber called inflation in our back pocket, and it has changed the cost of rebuilding and renovating your home.
Even, with COVID and everything going on, the cost of bringing in resources or the ability to even get some of those resources imported into New Zealand has been difficult. So the cost of building materials, those circumstances can change year on year. So you really do need to be reviewing it and making sure that it's current for you.
Know your home. And you've got this beautiful home. Know your home. Make sure it's protected.
Totally. And in terms of resources, we've spoken about a few things today. When you're a first home buyer, working through our checklist at slice2i.com, you can find the calculator there, then go into a Tower or a My Money Hub or any other kind of provider to get a quote and an understanding of exactly how risky that is, maybe what your premiums might look like, and whether or not that's something that you want to take on if you do think about your ability to resell. Are there any other kind of key resources that you would point property buyers toward?
I think just the other couple we talked about, Amy, was definitely check out the EQC site, Takatuaki. That's a good site. It tells you if there's been any earthquake or slip claim on that in the past. That's good to know. Quite easy to do. I assure people it's just a few minutes. Similarly, My Tower, jump on, do a quote. It's just a few minutes. That's in addition to all the things we've already talked about around limb reports and so on. And if you can look back if those areas have been impacted in the past. There's a lovely saying from the mayor of Chicago, never let a good disaster go to waste. Unfortunately, time passes and we forget about the past and we forget about those learnings. Look, I don't remember what happened in Shore Road in 1971, but I now remember that, and when I look back and look at the photos, you can see that there were slips there previously. And so, again, just checking out if there are any new planned subdivisions or whatever in the area of your home that you're looking at. So, and that can be on council sites.
And in terms of the risks there, we've obviously covered a lot today as well. There's flooding, there's earthquakes, there's coastal erosion, inundation.
I think, again, it all comes back to working with Mother Nature, not against her. And, when you do your research on that first home or your second home or third home, know your home. Insurance can change as we understand more and the climate does change. And it's not if, but, how it evolves. And so you do want to make sure and feel confident that downstream you will be in a good place. Your home will be in a good place and you won't be surprised. I do think also, Amy, if I look forward in some of the things that we're doing is that we are innovating on insurance. I know when people think of insurance, it's a bit of a dusty old industry and in some regards it is, but I think what we're doing, for example, at Tower is really quite innovative. We're doing things like parametric cover. What does that mean? It means that we are moving away from comprehensive insurance, which means, fire, flood, earthquakes, everything's rolled in and that's the type of policy you take. Parametric breaks that down and it's for specific events. For example, in the Pacific, we're offering it for cyclones. So you buy cover just for cyclones and then you buy cover for other areas.
Pick and mix approach.
It is a bit of a pick and mix. And that's something I would expect. That's something we're working quite hard on, particularly for areas that are in the face of changing climate conditions. It could be something we're working at the moment with some iwi groups to consider to support some of their maraes, for example, on the East Coast, which haven't had protection in the past and are being impacted by weather events. Something that we're working on in Fiji with communities. We've been doing for many years. And also this year we're launching in Tonga and we're doing that with the United Nations. So I think there are some exciting things. I know, insurance is my cup of tea. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but
I'm super excited about it. Well, maybe I'm just more interested in it in the moment as well, though, because it's front of mind and hopefully our audience is too. You start to think about flooding when it's happening.
And it doesn't have to be scary. It really shouldn't be. If you're sitting there lying awake at night worrying about it, I know it's a bit of an old cliche, but that's what worries us. So that's what we don't want our customers and communities doing.
So take that fair drive into research and knowing your home. Yeah, I mean, there's a healthy amount of, of worry. And then once you've got that insurance, you should be able to sleep easy and know that you're covered.
You should. And you can adapt it. It's not don't let it be a, set and forget. Don't. Keep evolving it, learning about your home. Your home changes. Your areas change. We learnt that. So make sure that you also check on a regular basis.
Yeah, and so some of those impacts, it's not really kind of which one do we worry about right now, so much as it's taken an individualized approach to the property that you're looking at.
Yep.
And, by getting a quote, you're going to get that sort of data-driven, insightful approach. I think, you've made I don't want to say it's a boring topic because I don't think it is. I actually do find it interesting, but hopefully our audience has found it interesting as well. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your expertise and also just a little bit about your personal experience. So thanks, Blair.
Oh, thanks, Amy.
Thank you for joining our community. Buying property isn't easy, but listening in will get you one step closer on your journey. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve your experience. Join our Facebook group, A Safe Space to Learn Together, or follow us on Instagram at @SliceToBuy. If you have any questions or topics you would like us to touch on, you can email us at hello@slicetobuy.com. A quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide personalised investment advice. We are not acting as financial advisors or taking into account your circumstances. To get personalised advice, join us at slicetobuy.com and engage with our partners who can act as your financial advisor or lawyer and support you with your specific needs.